Hello everyone, I welcome you all to today's session wherein we will be discussing the CAT 22 slot 1. Now, slot 1 was the very first slot that we had in the CAT paper this year, and it threw lots of surprises in terms of both the content as well as the overall structure of the paper. We shall be discussing all of this in today's session, so let's get started. So we shall be looking at broadly two aspects of the test. We will just be looking at giving you an overview of how the paper was, right, vis-a-vis the previous years that we had, right, and then that will be followed by a detailed analysis, detailed discussion of the three sections out here. So if you look at the overview first, right, so this was the pattern that we had this year. So this year as well, just like last year, right, there were 24 questions coming from the VARC section, 16 from RC and 8 from the verbal ability. There were 20 questions coming from the DILR, 22 from the Quant section. And with the non-MCQ type of questions still appearing in the test, right? So these were the number of non-MCQ that we had, 3, 6 and 8 in the three sections respectively. So when you look at this slide, it would appear as if that the CAT pattern has not changed much, but it's only when you dig deeper into the type of sets, the type of questions, the number of questions in each set that have appeared, we would be able to observe some differences. So let's look at the VARC first. Now in VARC there were 4 passages, each consisting of 4 questions each, and there were no non-MCQ questions in the RC part. This time in VARC we had few more questions, few new type of questions on sentence placement. Right? There were 2 questions which are on sentence placement, right? And para formation is a regular feature that we have in CAT VARC, and then there was para summary. Right? And the number of questions, as you can see here, were 8 in number, 3 from para formation, 2 from sentence placement, and 3 from para summary. We'll talk more about the VARC, right, in a while in our detailed analysis. Let's look at the DILR, the structure, right, overall. Now, this was a major change. There was a major change this time in the DILR section versus the last year. Last year, we had 20 questions. This year also, it's 20 questions. But one major change that we saw in the very first lot was there were 5 questions each, right, in every set that we had. Right? So there were 4 sets of 5 questions each, which overall changed the dynamics of the test, because previously what used to happen in the past years was students usually used to pick the easier sets, and they were typically the sets consisting of 4 questions. They used to crack them, and then they used to go further, try to solve maybe one of the 6 question set or partially, right, if not fully, and they were able to clear the cutoffs, right? They were able to leave that particular test with good performance. But this time it was not the case, because this time in every set that we had, right, there were 5 questions, and the level of difficulty for none of the sets can be called as easy, right? Maybe some of them were moderate, but not easy sets at all, because last year's we definitely had some very easy direct sets, right, which just by the look of it, one could pick it up, solve it, and move on in the test, right? But this time it was not there. So that was one major difference that we had in the DILR section as compared to the last year. And then coming to the Quant again, it was more or less on the same lines like last year. Arithmetic was again dominant, right, in the entire paper, right? Roughly 40% of the paper was coming from the arithmetic section, right? Followed by algebra, right? The weightage, right? There were 5 questions. Geometry, right? And also numbers this time sort of made a comeback, right? Because numbers is usually not seen a lot in CAT papers in the recent past, but this time in slot 1, we had 3 questions where the concepts of numbers either directly or indirectly were being used. Right? So this was the overall structure that we had for the CAT 22 slot 1. Right? Now we'll discuss more about it, right, as we enter the detailed analysis. So the 4 RC passages which were there, they were some of them were relatively moderate or easy, relatively, right? Some of them were tough, right? Or difficult in terms of both readability and also in terms of the overall difficulty level, right? Number of questions that we had from each RC is 4, right? So overall 16 questions, as we said. One of the sets was about ghosts, right? The undeads, right? About the ghosts. So basically, this set, it was easy to read, right? Easy to comprehend, right? Not very difficult, I would say. The language that was being used or the idea that was being passed on, it was easy to follow, right? And not just that, the questions were also of quite moderate difficulty level. They were not very difficult questions or close option choices, etc., right? However, this time there was one more observation which was seen in almost all the sets, all the RC passages. The question types that we had, the language, the structure of the question was not so simple. It was very complicated. So there was a very commonly use of double negatives which was being seen. So for example, in one of the questions, the question read as if which of the following would contradict the statement if it is false? Which of the following would contradict the idea of the passage if it is false? So over here, contradict and false both are being used, which force the candidate, right, to go through the question time and again to understand what my proper answer choice should be. Right? So that way, the time spent on every passage increased. Now, second set that we had, that was on Stoicism, right? It was again not so difficult to read, right? Not so difficult to read. However, all the sets were broadly lengthier, right? They were lengthy, but again, not. It's not like it would take a lot of time to complete a particular set. The typical time that you would have taken in your aim cats, right, or in the previous year cat, it was almost the same. However, maybe the difference would be like maybe some 30-40 words, which is not a large difference. Uh, the level of difficulty of the questions again was not very high, right? It was moderate. The questions were, some of them were directly, all right, asked from the passage, all right? So there was not a lot of inference that is to be done, all right, out here. One more passage that you had was on the Chinese art philosophy and the differences between the Western thought and the Eastern thought, right? So basically, this was again one of the most pleasant reads that we had, right? Very easy to follow, very easy to also answer, right? However, there was one set which spoke of human rights and technology, right? So I would say for any candidate, because it's all jumbled up, right, for every candidate. So we don't know the order in which you would be seeing the RC passages. So for any candidate who would have seen this human rights and technology passage in the beginning, right? Now, for such candidates, the overall journey of VARC would have been slightly tough, relatively, as compared to the others, because usually students have a tendency of not letting go of the first passage. So the first passage that they come across, they would definitely try to read it, attempt it, right? So that way, it was really a big challenge that posed. Uh, Particularly speaking for me, luckily, this was the first passage that I got, Stoicism, right? The second was about ghosts, right? The third was on Chinese art philosophy. This was the fourth one. So that way I was lucky. I personally was lucky because I did not have a lot of time anyways to read this because I had to attempt the VA section also, right? But just imagine someone who would have got this particular passage as the very first passage. They would have had tough time here. Coming to the verbal ability part. Now, in the verbal ability part, the number of questions from para formation is a repeat type. Right? There were three. Sentence placement is a new type. So basically, what happened in this verse? There was a paragraph given to you with several blanks in between, and there was one sentence which was given above the paragraph. And you, after reading the entire idea of the paragraph, were supposed to decide where would you place that particular sentence. And there were 4 slots. And the 4 options were the 4 slots numbers, slot 1, slot 2, slot 3, and slot 4. You're supposed to pick the slot where you would be placing that particular sentence. So in all, VARC, if you'll see, it was, of course, as compared to past years, it was lengthy, all right? But again, I would say manageable, right? It was manageable. But if we compare with the other slots, right, then the level of difficulty here was higher, right? It was higher. Now moving on. Now this is what we predict. So 85 percentile, that is the cutoff, right, for most of the top B schools would be around 22 to 24 marks. That translates to attempting around 9 questions, 10 questions with good accuracy. That should do the trick. 95 percentile, even better figure, upward of 90s. So that would be achieved at around 31 to 33. That is around 13, 14 questions with good accuracy. Right? And 99th percentile would be achieved with around 16 questions, 17 questions with a very good high accuracy. Now coming to the DILR. So DILR, there were 4 sets. Right? So there was a set on boys and girls planning a get together. Right? This was a tough set. Right? This was definitely a tough set. Anyone who would have started with this particular set would have had tough time in the overall DILR section. Right? Because this was really complicated because it's a Venn diagram firstly, and also it took some time for students to understand that it's actually Venn diagram. And once that understanding was there were so many complexities involved. You had to place boys also, girls also, singers also, dancers also in that particular 3-set Venn diagram. So all in all, it made all these difficulties made the set very, very difficult to attempt. Second set that we had, one was the second set in order here is the set on tokens. Right? So basically, the set was about how the investment would be done for different individuals based on the tokens which are given by the investors. Right? It was a set which was heavy on numbers. Right? So any student who had good knowledge, good grip over the numbers topic, factorization and all, they would not be finding it so difficult. Right? But still, this would be clear only after entering the set a little bit. Right? In fact, after also doing that factorization and all, there were some other bits of information that have to be covered in order to complete this particular set. That is what made it slightly difficult. But for someone who is good with numbers and all, this could be very well moderate set. Right? Once you enter the set, you realize this was not a difficult but actually a moderate set. Third set that we had was on goals. So this was about number of goals scored by 4 girls in 8 matches. There were 12 goals overall, and we were required to distribute the goals amongst the 4 girls and also across the 8 matches. So it was from your games and tournament topic, right? A favorite, sort of favorite for CAT, right? And the level of difficulty of this particular set was moderate to difficult. Right? So that means if you spend some time over here and if you're willing to very patiently apply hit and trial here and all, I think the set was doable also. And then the famous, very popular set, Metro, right, by now, because many people are talking about it. Right? Now this, at the look of it, appears very appealing. Right? An easy set to solve, but once you enter, you would understand the complexities that you have to go through. Right? So thus, this set also, we are classifying it as a very difficult set. So this was about the DILR section. Moving on. These are the percentile requirements. So for example, clearing the cutoff would happen around 11 to 13 marks. That means around 5 to 6 questions with good accuracy will do the trick. Now when I say 5 to 6 questions, that essentially means one set. So that means any candidate who was very focused, very balanced, and was able to pick one set, entire set for solving, they would be definitely clearing the cutoff, assuming that they're getting most of the questions right. 95 percentile mark at around 17 to 19 marks. Right? That is around 8 questions with good accuracy. 99th percentile mark would be obtained at around 24 to 26 marks. That would be around 10 questions with good accuracy. Moving to QA. This was the QA section, topic wise. Right? So from ERPV, there were 2 questions, right? Which were of easy difficulty level, right? They were easy in nature, must have. There were questions from percentage profit and loss, right? There was a question involving almonds, cashew, peanuts, right? That was a lengthy set, right? So if you wish to get into that and you're stuck in that, so there's a good chance that you would not be left with time towards the end of the test. Right? So such questions are to be avoided actually, and such questions are to be visited once you're done with the paper. All the questions you want to solve, If you're left with time, then you go back to such questions. So there were such speed breakers available here in BPL, percentage profit loss. SICI, it was a very direct question, very easy, right? Can be solved within a minute, right? If you are prepared. Time, speed, distance, it was an easy to moderate question, right, that we had. You had a good number of questions coming from numbers this time, right? And their difficulty level was moderate to difficult because there was one set which spoke of A is the greatest number, A is the number which always divides numbers of the type 3 par k plus 4 par k plus 5 par k. And similarly, there was one more information given about another number B, right? And that particular question would take some time to register, right, to understand, right? And once you understand it, it's not that difficult, but again, it would take some time to understand that particular question, understand the path that you would be taking. Geometry, there were two questions which were not very difficult, right? I would say manageable. Progressions, there were two questions, right? One involving summation, sigma, and the other one was a direct arithmetic progression question. From sets, that is Venn diagrams, there was one question which was again moderate difficulty level. Inequalities, modulars still are there, and a good number of questions came from this. AMA, there were again very good number of questions. Coordinate geometry and PNC, there was one question each. So overall, if you look at the quant section, so there were few easy and moderate minus level questions which were definitely there in the overall paper, right? And if you just give it a count, you can find easily around 7 to 8 questions of those, right? Which would be moderate minus or easy level of difficulty, right? Okay, let us look at the percentile and the score requirements for different levels. For quant section, the cutoff would be achieved, the 85 percentile would be achieved at around 13 to 15 marks, right? And this would require around 7 attempts with good accuracy, right? So 7 to 8 attempts with good accuracy should do the magic here of clearing the cutoff, right? Even for those students who are not so good with quant, right? And we already seen that there are around 7-8 questions that you can find from easy and moderate level difficulty, right? In the slot one at least. Now, 95th percentile mark would be achieved at around 21 to 23 marks, and the number of attempts I see is around 9 to 10 with good accuracy, and 99th percentile would be around 31 to 33 this time, and with around 13-14 attempts with good accuracy. So this is about the QA section. Overall morning slot, if you would see, overall morning slot, the 95th percentile, overall score of 64 should be sufficient. 97.5, we believe it should be 74, and 99th percentile, we are pegging it at 85 marks, right? Overall 85 marks should fetch you 99%. So this year CAT, if you look at it, it was similar to last year CAT in several ways, right? However, there were some differences as well that we have discussed in this session, right? So overall, this year CAT was almost on the same lines of last year, however with some major differences, right? So that's it for this particular session. Thank you so much.